About 6 years ago, I made arrangements that summer to rent a rustic cabin located on a sheep farm. It has been a place I've gone back to every year since then, except for last year, 2020. The cabin is located near West Rupert, Vermont, an hour east of Saratoga Springs, just across the border in Vermont. And I would head there a few weeks every year with Barnabas. We'd explore the surrounding area, hike up the mountain road, and I would also then go to a couple great bookstores in nearby towns. There was a back porch on the cabin, and a brook ran right beside it. I'm telling the truth on that. And the last time I was there, Barnabas didn't see him, but I saw a nice brown bear kind of come down the hill behind the cabin. Went a different way, but it was there anyway. Well, the cabin had internet. It did not have television nor cell phone connection. So lots of space for thinking and reading and writing and praying. And just down the road is where the sheep on the property were pastured. Joanne and Ray have been living there for well over 20 years or so, getting away from the hubbub of city life. While Ray still had his own landscaping architectural business, Joanne cared for the sheep. She was the shepherd. And their flocks were larger years back and much more work, especially during lambing season. The last few years, when I would head up for a week in June, I hit the time for shearing the wool off the sheep and was invited to help with some odd jobs that day. Ray, Joanne, and the shearer really did all the work, but I was thrilled to be there. The sheep were not keen at getting sheared. But once the sheep were in place, the shearer did his thing, one sheep at a time, and the wool would come off all in one place, all in one piece. Joanne had to do other work with the wool before taking it to someone in Bennington to get it ready to be made into yarn. Aside from rotating the flock to various fenced-in green pastures and having FaceTime each day, in the last years, some of the older sheep had to be put down, and even that was something that Joanne and Ray did. All part of the work of having sheep and learning from them. Joanne and Ray have been and are good shepherds, knowing their sheep, protecting them, and providing for them. Jesus obviously knew something about shepherds and sheep. He grew up in a culture which lived much closer to the earth than we do here. Sheep herding abounded in first century Palestine, sheep being a source of food, a necessity for temple sacrifice, and their wool as a staple for clothing and blankets. When Jesus identifies himself as shepherd, he was saying a couple things. For one, Jesus is saying and is calling us sheep, which is not exactly a compliment. Sheep require an enormous amount of work and care. Sheep are prone to get lost and to be lost, no bearings, can be absolutely clueless. If the shepherd takes his eye off the sheep, sure enough, they will wander. They get stuck, they fall into ravines, which is why the shepherd's rod and staff are absolutely essential. The staff, which is a shepherd's crook, is used to hook either the back leg or the neck of the sheep to rescue it. The rod, which is a straight pole, is used to prod the sheep along. The rod also serves as a long club to ward off predators. Except for headbutting or running away, sheep have absolutely no ability to defend themselves. It's curious, the psalmist in Psalm 23 doesn't say, "Your rod and your staff, they protect me or they rescue me." That's true, but the psalmist says something more. "Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Because the shepherd's interventions, necessary interventions, whether with sheep or with people, can be very difficult, sometimes even painful, and yet ultimately for the good. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Your rod and your staff with comfort, with strength. The Good Shepherd will intervene to rescue us when we need it. It may be quite difficult, painful, but it will not be bad. We will ultimately find comfort, find strength in the Good Shepherd's intervention with the rod and the staff. Now, a little bit more about sheep. They are so dependent on the shepherd, not only for protection, but for provision. Sheep do graze and move on to wherever the pasture seems greener. But if they're confined, or if their greener grass is gone, sheep will gnaw the pasture clean right down to the roots and destroy the pasture. Sheep have no ability to find water on their own. The shepherd must lead them to water, to still water, as we just prayed in Psalm 23. If the water is not still, they won't drink. If sheep are fearful or hungry or thirsty, they will not rest. They will refuse to lie down. For sheep to lie down in green pastures, they shall not be in want. Otherwise, they remain standing and anxious and bleeding. The shepherd normally leads his flock of sheep, that is, if the sheep knows the shepherd and has been trained, if you will, to follow the shepherd. However, sometimes the shepherd will drive the sheep, pushing them from behind if the sheep are already familiar with where they're going. All of which is why Jesus says of himself, "I know my own, and my own know me." We are known by the risen Christ as his own. Do we recognize his voice calling to us? And so for Jesus to use these loaded, familiar images, both about sheep and shepherds, he's making a statement about identity. He identifies himself with this necessary and yet inglorious profession of shepherds. And he's also making a statement about us. We are like sheep. It's hardly a flattering picture, but it's not without purpose. That underlying theme Jesus is suggesting here is one of compassion. As a shepherd, Jesus identifies himself with the least and the last and the lost, and we being among them. No sheep, no person is left out. For some of us, these images of Jesus, our shepherd, and all of us being sheep, at least we're not, making noises, but, we're sheep, may evoke gratitude for the provision and protection that we have known in our lifetime. We have every reason for hope that goodness and mercy shall continue to follow us. And when we get to places in our lives where we take a long view back of where we have traveled, what we have been led to, where and how we have gotten stuck in our own self-centeredness, in ravines that look only after ourselves and our own self-interest. Others of us may have the experience just now of walking through the valley of the shadow of death. It may have to do with our health, with our experience of COVID, our finances, our past life mistakes, our anxiously coming to retirement, or perhaps because of someone whom we carry in our heart, someone we love may be in real trouble. It may have to do with how the world seems to be changing, and it takes more and more and more to try to keep up. We may weep with those who weep and pray those tears in that sorrow. But the shepherd is there. The risen Christ knows. He knows you and he knows me. Father Anthony DeMello years ago told this story. A sheep found a hole in the fence and crept through it. It wandered far and lost its way back. Then the sheep realized that it was being followed by a wolf. The sheep ran and ran and ran, but the wolf kept chasing him until the shepherd came and rescued the sheep, carried him lovingly back on his shoulders to the fold and to the rest of the sheep. In spite of everyone's urging, the shepherd refused to nail up the hole in the fence. We need the help of the one who knows us so very well. Our good shepherd calls us by name, and he has claimed us as his own. Let us pray. Shepherd me, I'll be led away from that which draws me toward that which feeds me. Shepherd me. My inclination is my bramble, yours, my still water. My voice is a cacophony, yours, sweet melody. Shepherd me. You lead, I'll follow, and when I don't, find me. Shepherd me. I'll be led. Amen.